convert, pay up or die. And they look you in the eye, knowing you believe the lie that inclusion was everybody's friend.
Oh, hello. Oh, I'm in a cold office. Hello, good afternoon. How the devil are you? I thought I would give you a little bit of insight into my life, um, and how I conduct myself in private. Um, so I went and got my lovely nails done. It's about the only place left to go and have chit chat, or chit or chat with other women, and it's nice. And we're all discussing what we're going to have done with our nails. And I'm sat with women that I don't know, and this lady next to me, and we're talking about the council wasting loads of money on these pavements and roads, and then we talk about the new leisure centre that's being built. And the new leisure centre, I say to her, well, this is testing the water. This is quite a good way into discussing what I want to. And I said to her, oh, do you know the leisure centre, they're not having, there's no female only changing room for wet changing room. So it's all unisex. And she said, oh, I don't agree with any of this. And I said, well, it's about 90% of all sexual assaults in swimming pools and changing rooms, they happen in mixed sex spaces, not if I scratch not single sex. And I said, so it's really weird. And I looked at the impact assessments, and the council didn't even bother to find out what is the impact of having unisex spaces. Like, women aren't even considered. And so she says, she carries on, and then there's a woman next to her, a younger woman. So this woman's sort of my age, a bit older. And then there's a young woman next to her, and she says, oh, what do you think of J.K. Rowling? I know. Then I say, oh, did you know the council, in the council buildings, because there's a bloke called Helen, and in the council buildings, they're trying to get, or they are changing all of their toilets into mixed sex. And she says, oh, do you work at the council? And I said, oh, no, I'm a women's rights campaigner. She said, oh, good for you. Anyway, so the next woman says, oh, what do you think of J.K. Rowling? And I said, well, she's not hardline enough for me, to be honest. But she's fantastic. I'm so pleased that she said what she said. And it really has brought the conversation out into the open. And then I sort of mentioned about my billboard. And this young woman says, oh, all my friends think J.K. Rowling's terrible. She had loads of people my age, but I don't think she said anything wrong. And I said, well, I think you're absolutely right. I don't think she said anything wrong at all. And she says she's a maths teacher at one of the local secondary schools. And so I said, oh, interesting. How are your toilets? Like, do girls at your school have a single sex toilet? And she says, there are different, right? So there are some that are mixed sex and some that are single sex, and the mixed sex one are open plan. And so the majority of the toilets in the school are mixed sex, open plan toilets. And I said, oh, that's against the law. And she says, oh, well, you'll know then. Diane said it's her local council. So these are two schools in Trowbridge and not the Catholic one that I'm going to talk about today. So she says that she has these open plan toilets, and it's to do with bullying. And I said, well, I think discipline deals with bullying, to be quite honest. But it is against the law. And then I explained to her, and I'm going to explain to you again, any child above the age of 8, so under the schools, let me get this right. So under the regulation, as dictated by, let me tell you, it's the legal framework is a school premises England regulations of 2012. For all pupils age 8 and over, toilet facilities must be provided separately for boys and girls. Separate facilities are required unless they are a fully enclosed self-contained room, i.e. single user unisex toilet with floor to ceiling walls and a lockable door, and that includes drying your hands and washing and drying your hands. Okay? If you then have to come out of there to wash and dry your hands, that is not a fully enclosed single sex space. Okay? So otherwise, like, why would there be a difference about a single fully enclosed toilet? Like, everybody has a single fully enclosed toilet. And what they mean by that is that you have to be able to wash your hands, um, and it's a single user facility. Um, so you must not, for the safeguarding of schools, privacy and dignity, equality law, you must not have mixed sex communal toilets. So, what do I mean? What do they mean by open plan? Let me show you what they mean. Ooh. So they might mean something like this. Look, those are floor to ceiling doors. Nobody is saying that they're not. You can't see in. Great, but you do have to come out to wash your hands. So it'll be something like this. That was at a school in Bristol called Cottam School. I don't know. That's not a picture of Cottam School, but that's the sort of toilets they've got. This is what they're talking about. These sort of sinks in the middle, which means you really are sharing a sink with someone. And I like to see all those toilet seats up. Look, I wonder who's using those toilets. Um, and then that's another example of what is going on in the school. So that's a school very proud of mixed sex there. Look, mixed sex toilets. And they're open plan. And that simply means if someone's walking past and you're in a cubicle, you're completely exposed. Like, one of the things that makes toilets like such a place is the fact that you normally have a door. Like, the reason you can't have men using women's toilets is because you have a door to the outside world and then you have a door for your cubicle. So actually, between you and non-privacy, there are two doors before you've got someone of the opposite sex. And like, most people don't like going to the toilet, um, if there's even like a girl washing the sink, washing her hands in the sink or hanging about in the toilets, let alone if that is now a boy. So it's anyway. This woman had never heard of this, didn't know that it wasn't legal. Uh, so that's one woman, right? And then I moved down um, to get them painted. Thanks very much. I know they look great. I moved down to get them painted, and I'm next to very strangely, I'm next to a woman, and I can't remember how we got into it. I think she might have said working with children. She might have said, "Oh, it's been a long day or something, and um, I miss my long nails, and that I can only have over Christmas or something like that." And she mentions working with children. And I say, "Oh, do you work in a school?" And she said, I'm a deputy head, right? So she's a deputy head of a another school where I am. I won't name them because I do feel like it's not a private conversation because she was, it was in public. Um, but I don't want. She was a very, very nice woman. Clearly loved her job. Clearly really cared about the pupils, and clearly got it completely wrong. Right, totally and utterly wrong. So I say, "Oh, I'll ask you about your toilets then. What's your toilet setup?" And she very proudly said that what they did in their school is they decided to have a consultation to find out what the students wanted when they were having a refurb for their toilets. Like, not even lying. So, who decided on what the children would have? Well, the children, because she said it was really important to be child led. And I just said, what, teenagers? Yes. Yeah. So they get a say. And so she describes the fact that the 11-year-olds didn't really like to be around the stage 4, which, the key stage 4, which I think might be I didn't even know that they had 16 and 17-year-olds at the school, but they do. And so those pupils found that, um, challenging. Now, I don't know why you're having post 16-year-olds mixing in the kind of the regular area with all the other kids. I would have thought normally you would have a post, like a sixth form that was a little bit separate from the children, but even if key stage 4 is, even if it's like 15-year-olds. Anyway, so the children said they didn't like it, they found it a bit intimidating. So instead, they have mixed sex toilets for each year group, open plan. So that again, just to remind you, now you've got girls and boys sharing this sort of space. Now, I don't know what their toilets look like. They might look more like this. Um, and I think she said, I think it was either her or the other lady said that boys on one side, girls on the other, open plan like this. So, really taking away the privacy and dignity of children with the open plan. But then, in addition, putting girls and boys in those same spaces. And I said to her, did you know that's illegal? That's actually not that's against the law, that's against the safeguarding privacy and dignity of children. She had no idea. But I was also really shocked that anyone thought that children would be a trusted source for what is best for children when it comes to things like their privacy and dignity in those spaces. I just find it a little bit mind blowing. She's very pleased with herself, and I just thought, oh, that's clearly what's going wrong with education. We've spent too much time focusing on what children think they need, as opposed to thinking we're the fucking adults. Like we decide what's best for children because we have been children and we are now adults and we've had a very different upbringing, very different school system to these kids. And we are much more responsible and better behaved people because of it. And Christ knows what these kids are gonna be like at 50 and what the country will look like at 50 and what education will be like. But what we know is there is a school in Rotherham, probably because of attitudes like this, where the teachers can't go to school and feel safe, and so they're on strike. And I just anyway, so I said to her, "Oh, yeah, girls have to you have to have, single sex spaces," and I explained to her that the toilet could be fully enclosed, and she said, "Well, it's Ramadan, so for the Muslim girls, we do have, there are toilets that they can use, where they can, wash their hands, and it's fully enclosed." My mind is blown. Like, these people exist because you know that schools are shit. And then she talked a bit about how she was, um, uh, let me be fair to her. So she said, and of course we have gender questioning children. And I said, yeah, that's terrible, isn't it? And she said, yeah, well, I like them to, it's good. I like them to feel safe. And I said, well, what if kids don't go along with it? And she said, well, what do you think should happen? Um, she said, and I said, she said, well, we don't, we wouldn't force anyone to go along with anything, which was that was great. So that was right. And I said, oh, it must be so difficult for you because I had a few more minutes to go in the nail salon. So I didn't want to, it's not, it's not, I'm never going to convince anyone by being as aggressive as I might be elsewhere. And so I said, must have been really hard. And she said, well, the guidance really woolly. But, and she said, and I would, if any child comes to us and we do tell them that they have to speak to their parents, and then I would speak to their parents, which I felt was quite sensible. And then she said, but, well, when their parents go along with it, then we do. And I said, what if you had a member of staff that objected? And she said, no, we wouldn't force them to do it. She said, but we would say that if anyone went out of their way, like just going up to someone saying things, and we would consider that bullying. And I also felt that was very sensible. And she said, but when they're older and their parents know, then we want to keep them safe, and we would support them. And she said something that maybe it was the word safe, but whatever she said, I said in response, well, the trouble is, look, I don't think any school should go along with it at all. I don't think it is the school's business to go along with a child's delusion. Um, and I said, and the trouble is, these girls end up getting double mastectomies, and then they have hysterectomies in their early 20s, which is really dangerous because that's a lifelong complication. Testosterone is really bad for their bodies, can cause heart failure, and having a hysterectomy. Like if all the adults that they trust go along with it, then they're on that pathway, and then they end up having hysterectomies, and then that can cause cancer and Alzheimer's and anxiety and all this other stuff. And she said, yeah, but if you don't, there are really terrible consequences. Like they'll start cutting, and they'll start cutting, and they can even take their own lives. And I said, oh, unfortunately, the statistics don't bear out. I said, or rather, fortunately, the statistics don't support that. They don't actually kill themselves. That's not true. I said, this is the danger of the lobby groups that have informed the government and schools, and you. I said, because it's simply not true. And I said, I do think cutting is something that lots of children do for lots of reasons, none of them good. But it's a child who considers themselves not the sex they are may also be cutting, but that would be indicative of some sort of trauma or some crisis in their lives. I don't think that there's nothing to say that if you don't go along with the child's pronouns, that they will cut themselves. And anyway, and then I sort of backed out of the conversation because you can't bombard someone. That's not going to change their mind. I just gave her enough to think about. And I said, but you are breaking the law with the toilets. And that's probably something that you should look into. But that's what's wrong with schools. Like, what do the children want? Who gives a fuck what the children want? Like, really? They need boundaries. These children are anxious. These children have mental health issues because they don't have boundaries. They don't. They're treated like adults as if they know what they're doing, and they don't. Teenagers are idiots. Even the nice teenagers are idiots. Like they can get themselves into a cul-de-sac of something that isn't real just by thinking themselves into it. And she did. One thing I did agree with her very strongly was that she said that the impact of COVID has been absolutely horrendous on children's education in this country, and loads of teachers are finding it very, very difficult, which I think is probably true. But I just this this is what's happening. This is what's happening. If you're a girl who is a Muslim, then you are afforded rights and dignity that other girls aren't. And I did say to her also that what worries me about this is girls kind of can gaslight themselves into not knowing what it's like to have privacy. Like, you just rob them of that. You rob them of you totally rob them of their privacy and dignity. They don't know. And also that the social contagion and the fact that girls like to signal all the time that they are special, kind, wonderful individuals going along with the herd would mean that they probably would say that they want unisex toilets and open plan, because that's really accepting of everyone, because they're all persuaded by this cult. So it's just it's just very odd. And obviously it starts in primary school. Like, you can't, unless you're Catherine Burblesing, you which I think should be everybody's school. I really do admire the way she runs her school. Um, but it's the shame of it. It's schools face issues with children's behavior, and what they do around a child having a fucking tantrum for being told no is they find other ways of saying no. It's just utter madness. Like, if a child is struggling to do as they're told, then you find ways to make them do as they're told. You don't find strategies so that you accept them not doing what they should be doing by pretending you didn't want them to do it in the first place, by pretending it's a choice. Um, it's it's a really, really sorry state of affairs. And so that's the two schools, the two choices that aren't Catholic, and you can't get into the Catholic school. And I don't know what the rules are on the Catholic school in the area, but I just know that the two schools that most people will send their children to in the place in which I live which has a population, which I always thought was about 20,000, but it's about 38,000 people. You don't get a choice to to put your to put your child in a school where they're safe and their privacy and dignity is respected. And I would imagine that's the same in absolutely hundreds and thousands of schools across the country. And even if you have a choice, so the deputy head teacher was keen on telling me that there was a bit of a choice. And the other woman, I said, but it's illegal. It doesn't matter if you say, oh, you can pick this one or this one or this one. If one of them is open plan and mixed sex, it's unlawful. Anyway, um, we are doing these weird things where the more safe we try and make our children, i.e., not offended, not hurt feelings, the less safe they actually are. Like this woman, the deputy head teacher, really thought that it was a really wonderful thing to tell a perfect stranger that they let the children lead that decision. And I was aghast. I was shocked. I don't I just like why do we have parents in schools if we then say to children, you know best? They don't. They don't know best. They don't know best at all. But anyway, I'm actually too cold where I forgot to switch heating on. So I thought we should all just reflect on how utterly mad it is that like this school is making accommodations for Ramadan so girls can come and say their prayers. Like, no. These are secular schools or Catholic schools. I don't think other schools should exist in this country, actually. I think if you want to go to a religious school that is not Christian or Catholic, of a Christian denomination, if you want to go to one of those schools, then I think that should just be available at the weekend or after school. Aside from that, no, no. Let's bring this all back. I can see that I'm also going a bit fuzzy. So uh did I see the video of the school of the kids beating a teacher who's wearing a MAGA hat? Oh, no, I didn't. But we've lost the plot. We've lost the plot. And children are starting school like barely being able to speak and communicate, no manners, because they're just not being talked to enough. Cindy says, please make more V-necks. Your wish is my command. Anyway, if you if you can address this with your local school and your sort of responses when you talk to the school, um, you want to talk about safeguarding, statutory breach of premises regulations, and failure to provide single sex provision under the Equality Act. So these are the sort of things that you need to do if you're going to complain to the school. And I think maybe we all should. So the sort of thing that will happen to the schools is they could face regulatory downgrades, false policy reversals, legal challenge, public scrutiny, and significant reputational harm. So, so yeah, isn't it terrible? Right. If you can hold people to account, because you should, then I promise we will win. If you can speak and say the things without emotion and go into schools and then maybe report them to the regulatory bodies, then I promise we will win. In fact, I'm going to pen a letter this afternoon to Wiltshire Council about this because they like me. And do you know why else we're going to win? Well, because I never lose.
They say convert, pay up or die, and they look you in the eye, knowing you believe the lie that inclusion was everybody's friend. When the truth now we all know, that was the beginning of the end. You didn't fight back, you failed to resist, and now the country is under their fist. No sun, no fun, no sky. All the music now must die. No more thinking thoughts, shouting at council, schools, and courts. Welcome to Britain under the